Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third webinar in our Powering a Modern Workplace with Sparkrock 365. And today we will be discussing the impact of migrating on managing your workforce and payroll. I'm Jenny Lawrence. I'm a customer success representative here at Sparkrock, and I will be your moderator for today's event. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to welcome our main speakers for today's event. It is James Faw and Jennifer Mears. You probably all know our CTO and co-founder, James. He has not only been co-presenting each webinar in this series, but also done countless other demos and webinars for us in the past. And Jennifer is a senior workforce consultant here at Sparkrock. Chances are many of you know her quite well also. For the past year and a half, she has been helping our customers with the delivery of our HR management, scheduling, time entry, and payroll product while ensuring the continuous improvement of Sparkrock's workforce tools. Needless to say, you are in good hands here. So with that, James, please take it away.
Thanks so much, Jenya, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm looking forward to talking to you about our topic today. So just a quick review of the agenda. We're powering a modern workplace with Sparkrock 365. And so we're going to first do a quick summary of what the application updates mean to you. So what's changed in the application, if you're familiar with 2016, or if you're not, then just kind of give you a roundup of some of the key features. Then I'll hand over to Jen, who is going to do a demonstration and explanation of some of the highlighted features that you see there: HR requests and approvals, active and leave FTE, comp journal, worksheets, retro pay, and salary deferrals. Those are kind of the stars of the release, some of the areas that have changed the most. We wanted to highlight those for you. And as Jenya mentioned, we'll have opportunity for questions. So please, we're happy to take those questions. Please just type them up in the panel. And we'll make sure they get addressed at the end of the meeting. Okay, so starting off with HR management improvement. So, within the umbrella topic of workforce, we have our human resources, we have payroll, and we have scheduling and time entry. So I'm going to just touch on highlights in each one of those. So you can see here anything with a green check mark has significant enhancements, and anything with the new beside it is completely new. So I'm just going to highlight some of those. First of all, on the role centers, we do have a human resources manager role center that's completely new, completely overhauled and new, really, with significant enhancements. One of the key features of it is the HR charts. So you'll see those, but where you can analyze active or leave FTE by HR department, category, union, those kinds of things. We also have a couple of different turnover analysis charts that are built out of the box, and a few others as well. So some really exciting things that don't require sort of a connection to BI tool. You're seeing those charts, they're built right away and they're real time with the ability to drill down. So if we go down into absence management, the next one, you can see there's some areas of functionality that are sort of similar to what we had in 2016. So essentially everything, all the major features of 2016 have been moved forward, but we've taken an opportunity to clean up, improve, streamline whenever possible. One of the net new features, again, in absence management is the concept of per pay entitlements and a worksheet for that. So in 2016, a lot of the per pay calculations were done through the payroll calculation engine, and so we've moved that out of payroll to sort of simplify the sort of the clutter that in payroll, and put it into its own calculation engine that's purpose built for entitlement type functionality. So that's the per pay entitlement worksheet. Moving on into benefits management. Again, there's some new changes to benefits management with the introduction of benefit groups and benefit plans and the relationship between those to make it easier to set up multiple things. Same thing with collective agreement management. We've overhauled sort of the layout of that page, how they're stored and how they're tracked, and really improve those. A few others too, under position management, HR requests, the approval of HR requests, that's all net new. Approvals in 2016 only existed if they were entered by a delegate, and so now we have a full multi-level approval workflow that's available on HR requests, and there's lots of enhancements that Jen's going to highlight for you on HR requests themselves. Employee experience is also essentially a new module for tracking experience or seniority type calculations, and so that's a whole area that's been enhanced substantially, is practically net new, and is available there, including the seniority types. So that's tied in with the experience, and where a single employee can belong to multiple seniority types with different experience calculations, accruing and providing credits at different rates depending on the rules that are set up. If we move on into compensation, there's the whole compensation journal and how that's calculated. So that's completely new and sort of the first stage of the payroll calculation. And so you can see lots of other things there: compensation journal, pay grids, rates and allowances, and compensation ledger. And then if we look over to employee self-service and manager self-service, we've made some enhancements to all of the areas with the check marks there. A lot of that actually looks quite similar to what it was in 2016, so fewer changes, just some optimizations in those areas. We have made, for example, to HR tasks, some very significant enhancements that we'll also touch on today. So hopefully that gives you a summary of the HR enhancements. I want to move into payroll administration, and the biggest change is really the payroll calculation engine and moving away from the Sarenic payroll calculations. So that's been completely removed from the solution. And replaced with sort of a modern payroll calculation engine. And we've added some additional features to that, including the ability to do salary deferrals. So that's very important for our customers that are in the education sector, K-12, but also any of our customers that have maybe some sort of a sabbatical type scenario where you work 4 years and you get 1 year off or something like that. We have out-of-the-box functionality to handle all of that. The other area that we really improved is retro pay, and I think Jen is going to touch on that as well. But really, where retro pay in 2016 was only supported for a retroactive grid change, retro pay today has been expanded to support additional scenarios, like someone was hired incorrectly and so we need to pay the difference for what they should have been paid for some time ago, or someone progression was missed and we need to catch them up. So some significant enhancements there, and then also a salary calculator and some inputs for how you input stuff. So some really neat things there. Also in payroll, the tax tables no longer require a file. It's all web services updates. You just run a function whenever the tax tables get updated, and all of them get updated using the services. So that's with the tax table service. So again, several things that we're quite excited about. And then again, summarizing with scheduling and time entry, we do have those areas mostly kind of moved over, as they were areas that have been revamped quite recently, timesheets as well, specifically. So the concept of time entry 2.0 that all got moved over into Sparkrock 365. And scheduling has gone through some updates as well, with a new role center and the scheduling administrator, as well as some performance enhancements and updates and optimizations there too. So hopefully that gives you a quick overview of those. Again, we're going to highlight a few of those areas with Jen in just a moment. So I wanted to take a moment and just remind everybody of this webinar series. So the whole goal of this webinar series is to help our existing customers really understand the implications of getting to Sparkrock 365. Again, we've released the solution now. We've got new customers going live on it, and the first existing customers are working through upgrades into this. It's a great solution, a truly cloud foundation, and so that was the focus of the very first, why a Microsoft Cloud Foundation matters. So talking about the Cloud Foundation, the Microsoft features and functions, and what you get from being on that Microsoft Cloud platform and the integration with Office 365. So that webinar is available as a recording So please look for it. Feel free to watch or consume that data. Some really great points there. And then our second one was focusing on the finance requirements or finance features and functions, what's new and what's different there. And I co-presented with Stephanie Gunn. And so again, that also is recorded and available and has highlights and demonstration of some of the key features. And then today, of course, we're focusing on the workforce features with Jen Mears. And then we're wrapping up the series talking about customer success and project management, really talking about what the migration really looks like, what your experience will be going through this migration, what gets updated, what gets reconfigured, how much time to expect, all of those sorts of things. So we think the full series together is very helpful in terms of helping our customers understand the migration process. So let's talk a little bit about what the application updates mean for you, what they look like. So again, we've spent a lot of time rebuilding the entire application, right? Part of this migration to 365 involved a code change. So everything in the application has really been looked at. We've optimized, streamlined, focused on the UI. The UI of Business Central itself, I believe, is a huge improvement over 2016. It's definitely Microsoft had invested. It looks better. It's easier to use and navigate. And so we've, as we're moving functionality into that platform and rewriting it into AL, we took the opportunity to really improve whatever we could as much as possible. There's new ways of working with the system. So it's a true cloud and SaaS application, which means it's available on any device. And with our current pandemic situation, what seemed to be a nice to have, being able to access it anywhere on any device, is now quickly becoming a need to have, right? Being able to work from anywhere you need to work, pivot to working from home, flexible work schedules, those sorts of things. There's some tremendous advantages to that. So now the solution is available for anywhere you want, on mobile, tablet devices, or even on multiple devices at the same time if necessary. Those are specific scenarios that we've tested out. So you might be approving something on your mobile while you're working with a transaction on your desktop. So and then thirdly, more intuitive and flexible licensing. So there are some new licensing models that many of you are working through conversations with the customer success team on, and what that means to you, but that opens up more opportunities in the application as well. So just to highlight, this is the same footprint as before. There's been some terminology changes. There's a few tweaks to some things, but the overall footprint of the application is the same, with even deeper integration across those. So, some of the things are, for example, in the workflows in finance now, we have the ability to point those workflows at, for example, a position or a position class. And so before in 2016, we would point them at a user. Now we can point them at a position, and that makes it a lot easier to manage changes. So it means the incumbents in those positions, so changes made in HR, automatically update finance workflows. So again, those are some of the things that are sort of built in the application that are done better, or you can do more with. So again, we'll touch on some more of the workforce features with Jen shortly. I did want to touch on the user types. So this is a change from 2016. In 2016, there was essentially two user types, the users using the employee center and then the users using the full client. So we've spread that out into three user types. Microsoft has changed their licensing, and so Sparkrock has changed. We've rejigged ours as well to sort of align with the constraints that Microsoft has put in place. But that's also opened up opportunities for us. So there is the full user, and that's for any similar to the full user in 2016. Those are all back office users. So accounting manager, accounts payable coordinator, accounts receivable purchasing agent, HR, payroll, training and scheduling admin. Those folks that are working in the solution every day still need a full user license. We then have this middle license, which is a manager user, and those users also work in sort of what we refer to as the core product. There's specific role centers for those users. That could be a supervisor, a school principal, school secretary, anybody that approves something or enters a requisition is someone that needs that manager user license. And then the third is the team user. So those are users that are using, that are employees, employee self-service, or if it's on finance, then it's the employee expense claims. So those are the three user types with tiered pricing that goes along with them. And in fact, if you have, a full user includes access to the manager and the team user. So the further up, further to the left you are, it includes the other licenses for that user. So those are some of the changes. So let's take a look. Let's move into a demonstration. So I'm going to hand things over to Jen now. And Jen, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to talk to us about these new features. I know the folks on the call are really excited to see them.
Thank you, James. So one of the first thing I wanted to show you here are some of the enhancements to our HR requests. So we have introduced the concept of approvals for HR requests, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we go into the system and see how you can define an approver based on the HR request type. So depending on the reason that you are creating an HR request, you might want it to be approved by a different user, depending on the circumstance, and how you can allow multi-level approval rules. Maybe it's based on which department the employee in question is in. Maybe it's going to depend on, certain criteria within that HR request. It will determine who you want the approver to be. Another thing we're going to take a quick look at is sort of the refinement of our HR request forms. So based on the HR reason code, which is of course the backbone or the reason that you're doing an HR request, based on that reason code, the form will appear differently because it's going to only provide the information or the fields or the sections that you need for that particular HR reason code. And we'll see what that looks like. I'm going to pop into the system now, and we'll take a look at our list of HR reason codes. So we'll first sort of touch on the concept of the HR request approver. So we do have the reason codes listed here. These are our standard reason codes. Again, you do have the capability of copying these reason codes and sort of making them your own, maybe having a different categorization for the same type of thing. But depending on the reason code, you can attach an HR request approval filter. So potentially you have a specific user who's going to be approving all of your new hire requests, but you have another user that would be approving somebody returning, from work. So maybe for your new hires, it has to go to the, director of HR, but when you're doing a full return, you're sending it to, an HR officer. So it really depends on how you want those processes to flow, because in addition to our normal workflow process within an HR request where it's reviewed by HR, then reviewed by payroll, and then completed, this is an additional step that it's optional, but you can have it go to another user to approve it before the HR request is actually processed and committed to the database. I also wanted to talk just a little bit about this type of leave request, because process type, this is actually going to determine the form that you're using when you do an HR request. And we'll see that in just a moment. I'm going to quickly walk through a sample of a new hire and a sample of putting someone on leave. And you'll see that based on the process type, whether it's a new hire, whether it's a transfer or details change, or whether you're putting somebody on leave, it's actually going to display different fields for you, different things that actually need to be filled out depending on what it is that you're doing. So it's a much more efficient process in terms of knowing what you have to put in for this particular transaction. So if I go over here, I have a couple of HR requests already sort of mid-process, just so we can sort of take a look at how those forms display based on that reason code that you've selected. So if I go into my new hire HR request, the HR reason code I used in this particular HR request is what drives the form that I will be using to enter my details. So if I click on process and details, you will see here that the form displays the sections that are relevant to this particular HR reason code that I've selected. So of course, for a new hire, I'm going to have all of my employee details like address and contact information, as well as the assignment information, because I'm hiring somebody into an assignment, payroll information. Of course, this is probably the heftiest HR reason code because we have all of the sections that are required when entering a new employee, from pay to benefits to assignment allocations in terms of their account sets. Employee experience, James was mentioning a little bit about this new concept of seniority. So you can track seniority coming into the role, and then it's going to accumulate experience as they're working with the organization. But of course, this is a very detailed HR request because it's a new hire, and all of this information is generally required for a new hire. If I just click close on the details here, you'll see that we now have that request approval button. So that allows you, prior to processing it, to click request approval. It will then be sent to the appropriate approver to approve it before it's committed, like I said, to the database. And just to touch on the concept of the refined forms, if I go into another HR request that I have for a different reason code on leave, you will notice that if I go into my details, the form looks a little bit different because it's only going to display the sections and the fields that are required for this particular HR request reason code. So in this case, I've selected to put somebody on leave. I don't need a lot of those fields and a lot of those sections that I had initially with my new hire HR request. So now it's just showing me, the cause of inactivity, how I'm putting this employee on leave. We're actually going to touch a little bit deeper into this in a few minutes in terms of putting somebody on leave and how we sort of refined that. But I just wanted to sort of show you here how the form itself is really driven by the HR reason code that you're selecting. So it makes it for quite an efficient process. And then just a little bit more on the concept of putting somebody on leave. We have this new concept of putting somebody's record potentially partially, their FTE, either all on leave or partially on leave. So before it was always sort of, their active FTE, or they don't have any active FTE at all. But we've introduced this concept that they could potentially have part or all of their FTE allocated to a leave FTE. So at any time, you're able to see what's my total FTE in my organization, and that could include active and those on leave, because it's a placeholder and you're holding FTE in a leave, sort of a leave state. So a single employee assignment can be both active and partially on leave, and we can also indicate multiple causes of inactivity. So if somebody's on leave, it might be for a variety of reasons, and we'll see what that looks like now. So if I go back into my on leave HR request here, you can see that I've left her as 0.5 active. So she's still working half-time actively, but 0.5 of her FTE has actually been put on leave. So she's still working part-time, half-time, and the rest of it is on leave. But we can also drill into the leave FTE to track multiple reasons for that leave, because sometimes people really are splitting the time on leave into two different reasons. So as a sample here, I just selected two different causes of inactivity, but you can really break it down as granularly as you require. So I've said, 0.25 of her leave FTE is for a long-term disability claim, and 0.25 of it is a sabbatical. I mean, you can really break it down however it needs to be broken down. It might just be one cause, but you can further always refine it if it's more than one. You can also indicate how many hours in total, are sort of allocated to each cause of inactivity. And then if she's being paid while on leave, you can also indicate which HR pay code to use so that she will continue to get paid. And of course, she might be just being paid for one of these lines. So 0.25 is still a paid leave, and another 0.25 is an unpaid leave. And in addition to this, we also have a new HR request, HR reason code called gradual return to work. So this is very useful because it allows you to future date the sort of schedule that the employee is going to be returning from leave. So I might know that Jake is going to be returning, the end of August for, 50.5 FTE, and then he'll be back full-time at the end of September, something like that. So you can future date all of this gradual return to work schedule right in your HR request. So if I go into my details, I can future date the plan that his schedule is to return. So as of July 21st, I did this in the past, but as of July 21st, he would have returned with active 0.5 FTE, and he's still on leave for 0.5. Come August 4th, it's going to automatically change his assignment because I'm able to future date it to 0.75 active FTE and 0.25 leave FTE, which of course is going to affect his pay. So you can just set it and forget it unless it changes. And the nice thing is that we also have something called a change in gradual return to work. So even if you have set this up and it's sitting waiting to be processed as those dates pass, it's not set in stone because, as we all know, this often changes because, you know, things are, you never know how things will turn out. So if you do need to make a change to this, we have a process called a gradual return to work where you can come in and actually change these values. The next thing I wanted to show you is our compensation journal. So this is a tool that we use to load all of our earnings for a pay period and sort of review our pay data prior to sending it to our payroll processing engine to do all of the gross to net calculations. So it's somewhat of a worksheet sort of format where you're able to see all of the employees being paid. You can make sure that all of your new hires are captured. Any changes are sort of showing up as you would expect them to. Any transfers, salary changes, terminations are falling off. It's just a really quick review of who's getting paid. Does it make sense? Okay, let's send it for processing in our payroll batch. So let's take a look at the compensation journal to see what that looks like and talk sort of about the concept of loading into it and how you can play around with the data, reload it, and sort of review it before you send it for processing. So you can have multiple compensation journals. Potentially you might have different pay cycles. So you might have one that's biweekly arrears, one that's biweekly current, one that's semi-monthly, etc. So you, like I said, could potentially have multiple compensation journals that you're working in, or you might just have one and all of your employees are loaded into it. So before I look to the lines that I've already loaded previously, I just want to show you sort of the concept of loading lines. Loading lines means what information do I want to pull in and review? So you have options. You might really only want to look at salary lines. You might think, okay, I just want to do a quick check to make sure that all my new hires are in and all my transfers, pay is coming, you know, over as expected and that my terminations have fallen off. So you might not want to look at time entry right now. You might not want to look at, you know, stat holiday pay or any one-time payments. You might choose to just load plain salary lines and have a quick look. If all looks good, you can continue to build on your lines in the journal, meaning you just add things as you're looking at them. But do keep that in mind that you have choices. Maybe you only want to load absences because you're looking for specific looking for specific information for that particular pay period. So you do have a choice to load and you can reload. You can clear your batch and reload, and you can make changes to who you're pulling in, and it allows you to sort of really have a good concept of who's getting paid this pay period, what it looks like before you send it for processing. If I just scroll over, I mean, you can scroll down and view all of your employees that have loaded. You can also scroll over to see all of the information that pertains to this particular pay period. So I can see the assignments that my employees are in, the pay codes that they are being paid in terms of their regular pay, like salary, or if you loaded their hourly earnings, either, you know, just as default loads or from a timesheet, it would show up here what pay code is being used, the hours they're being paid for, their FTE. So it's a nice way to quickly say, oh, yes, that is correct. This employee is only currently working at a 0.8 FTE. The amounts, it also sort of compares the per pay assignment amount to the amount, because if something looks really off, you might say, oh, that's right, they were off for an unpaid leave for 9 days, so that makes sense that their amount is quite a bit lower. So it's a way to eyeball everything that's coming in. You can see the number of working days in the pay period, and then you can just send it across to the payroll batch for processing. So again, it's just a nice way to be able to really have a quick overview of everybody getting paid in this particular pay period, but you can always clear it out, reload it, clear it out, reload it as required as you're looking through the information for that pay. One of the other enhancements in 365 is the usage of worksheets. We've introduced quite a few worksheets. So similar to the compensation journal in that you have lines loaded, you can review the data, you can do mass changes with these worksheets. It makes it really easy to get bulk information into the system, but you can play around with it before you apply it to, be saved in the database as records. So the nice thing is that you have time, you have time to review it, make changes, you can clear it out and reload it, you can play around with the values in the worksheets, and then you can apply it to the database. So this applies to things like retro pay, progression, so anybody who needs to have a pay increase based on the pay grid that they're in and their anniversary, then it'll bring up everybody who's up for a progression rate change this month or whenever you run it. Annual per pay entitlements for leave banks. So you could do an annual worksheet run for giving everybody their new vacation allotment for the year. Or employee experience. You want to load from January 1st to December 31st, all of the experience that people have accumulated in their roles, and then it assigns that new experience value to the employee's records. So if they worked the full year, it will add a year of experience to them, which can be used for many things, for seniority tracking, but also it could be used for progression. So we have the ability to take that employee experience, apply it to the progression, apply it to the progression worksheet to actually allow them to move into the next step based on experience. We also have employee assignment worksheets. So this allows you, it's very, very good when you're doing any kind of mass data movement, but it allows you to assign employees into assignments en masse. Maybe you have, 50 people or moving into a new role or taking on an additional role. You can actually use the assignment worksheet to put them all in the role, en masse. So you don't have to do 50 manual HR requests, but you can load them all at once. And also HR request worksheets. So here, if you wanted to pay, or if you wanted to do a details change for every employee, you can load mass HR requests and then work within that worksheet to get the details in. Once you process it, it creates all the HR requests for your audit trail. So you could be sitting with 50 or 100 or however many HR requests ready for processing, but then we have a bulk HR request processing tool. So not only does it create them en masse by using the worksheet, but then you can also apply them and move them to the completed status and actually commit them to the database through that mass HR request processing feature that we have. So let's just take a look at one of our worksheets to give you an idea of what this looks like in the system. Let's look at the progression worksheet. And a lot of these worksheets look very similar, where you have the menu item for loading your lines, and then you have the lines where you're actually working within the data and you're able to manually change them, and then it has a process function. So let's sort of just really quickly go through the process of a worksheet. So you're loading your lines. This is where you can filter. So you can say, effective a certain date, I want to load everybody who's due for a progression change. You can filter it by only specific progression methods. Maybe you only want to do it for one group of employees. Maybe you only want to do it for a couple of employees, so you can put a few employee numbers in the filter here. So most of our worksheets are always going to let you filter the employees that you're looking to actually load into your worksheet. Then you can review the data here, and if I scroll over, I'm able to see what it loaded. I'm able to change the amounts if I want to, on a one-off basis, because the information might be a little bit of an exception for a couple of employees. And then once everything looks okay, you say process all lines or process selected lines, and it does all of your HR requests for you. So like I said, you're doing it en masse. You don't have to worry about it one by one creating these HR requests, and then you use the tool to mass approve or mass close and complete those HR requests. So high volumes of data changes in very easy, readable worksheets that you can easily overwrite if necessary, or you can simply review them and process all of the lines, or process individual lines if you wanted to do, a few at a time. But this essentially is a standard format for anything from, retro changes, mass HR requests, progression, experience, etc. And we'll be looking a little bit closer at the retro pay now as well. So one of the nice enhancements to our retro pay functionality is that we have new scenarios and new use cases for it. So of course, if there's a pay grid change and the pay grids change across the board and it's a retroactive date when you go in and you change your grids and you're saying it's actually effective, June 1st, then you can run our retro worksheet, which again looks very much like the progression worksheet, and it says anybody who was in this particular grid gets a retro calculated because we know that the grid changed back to June. But some of the new use cases that we have is for fixing an incorrect pay. So if they had a salary increase. So if they had a salary increase as an individual, and they've been given retroactive a retro back to June, then you can simply in your HR request indicate that this is to be retroactive and the retro date. So we'll take a quick look at what that looks like. And also if they had, say, the incorrect pay rate or an incorrect FTE, you just simply say, I'm changing this in a details change and it's retroactive, and the retro worksheet will then calculate what they should be paid retroactively. So let's take a quick look at what that would look like in an HR request. So I do have an HR request created here called a details change. So that's the reason, the HR reason code is a details change, and that would be where I indicate that they're having a pay change. So let's open that. And I'm going to look at the details of my HR request. And if I scroll down to the payroll section, you'll see that this is where I indicate the new pay. It might be effective, this upcoming pay period. So my effective date I would have put on the main screen might be, next week or the start of the new pay period. But I've indicated here that retro is to be calculated. So once I select that retro is to be calculated, I just simply indicate the retro date, and it could go back 2 months, it could go back, many months. And then the retro worksheet knows who to pick up when I run that. So you might want to run your retro worksheet prior to running your pay, and everybody who has a retro indicated would then have a retro amount calculated. And it would actually create a new an HR request for a one-time retro payment. So again, you can create those HR requests through the worksheet, and I'll just take a really quick look at this worksheet and just show you again in a very similar way to the way the progression or the HR request worksheets work. You would simply, load your lines. You could filter if you wanted by specific employees, but you would select all the criteria here that you need. The cause of the retro would either be a grid change or an assignment change like we just did for that employee, and it would pull in all of the applicable employees that have retro calculated for the pay. The amount, you would be able to view all of it in the worksheet before applying it. So it's not just going to blindly, update all these retro amounts. It's going to give you a worksheet so you can see if everything makes sense, and if it does, you then process it. All the HR requests are created, and then you can mass approve those HR requests. So another thing that I just want to talk briefly about and show you a little bit on is the salary deferrals. So what this is it allows for employees that are getting paid, say, for a period of the year, maybe 10 months, but they actually want their salary spread over the whole year. So it's very common with teachers. So you might be paid for 10 months, but you don't want them paid on a 20 pay cycle. You want them to be paid 26 times in the year. So what it does is it withholds a certain amount of pay every paycheck. So instead of, dividing their salary by the number of pay periods they're actually getting paid, it does a full biweekly, spread of the salary. But every pay for certain portion of the year, those 10 months that they're working, it's putting aside that deferred amount into a bucket that will then be paid back in payments over the summer. So it's really, really handy because at any given time, you know exactly what is owed to that employee because you're paying them, essentially on a thinner spread than if they were paid just the portion that they're working. So it's really nice to be able to at any time say, we've paid them this much, but we still owe them this month. And, it's going to work out that it's paid over the summer, but that's sort of the concept. And if we just briefly look at the setup of the deferrals, it kind of gives you an idea. If I go into my HR pay cycles, for example, these are just all of the pay periods in the year. And essentially, you can have a deferral cycle or you can have one where there is no deferral. But let's say I do have teachers, for example, on a deferred cycle. What you actually do is you indicate at each pay period whether it's a deferred period or a payout period. So you can see I've got deferrals all the way into the summer. And then at that point, they have this bucket that's had this certain portion of money being held back that will then be paid out. So it's going to break even at the end of the year. So they're deferring continuously and then paying it out over the summer months. So that's sort of the concept of that. And when you're in your compensation journal, like we saw, we have columns to say what they're what they have earned this pay versus what they're actually being paid, and the difference would be what they've deferred. So it always shows you in the compensation journal every pay, sort of your running deferral, how much they're putting aside every pay. And then finally, as James mentioned, especially during these times of COVID-19, we all know how important remote and mobile access is. So essentially with our system, you can work anywhere, anytime on any device. So it's intuitive navigation and layout for all screens and all sizes. You can view summary level data, you can drill into the details, so it's really handy to be able to access your information no matter where you are, no matter what the situation in the world is. And it just really simplifies everything in terms of all of us, most of us working off site. So, you really want access to your data, you want reliable access to your data, and our system is really flexible in that no matter where you're accessing it, it's very easy to view and drill down into that information that you really need to get to. So I think it is over to James. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jen. I know there's definitely some really exciting features there in terms of the changes to HR requests, the changes to the role centers and the navigation itself, going to mobile, going to retro pay, workflows, and definitely some really exciting things. Thanks for taking the time to show us today. So I wanted to quickly wrap up with, at any given moment, we have two options to step forward into growth or step backwards into safety. So and I found this a very interesting quote from Abraham Maslow. That's the same Maslow as the Maslow hierarchy of needs from our Psych 101 days. Yeah, so just in terms of considering where you want to go with the solution and what you want to do, we can provide you with some additional help. So again, continue to explore the Sparkrock 365 through the webinar series. As we mentioned, we have one more live series, but this one plus the other two are available in recording format already. So if you didn't attend those, we highly recommend attending them. And then get engaged with your customer care rep or account exec to discuss the next steps. So if you're in discussion with Angela or Raul or somebody else, please continue those discussions, and they can coordinate sort of whatever information you need in order to understand what the implications are.
I wanted to thank you, James, very much, and Jennifer, of course, for taking the time to share your demo and presentation with us today. That was fantastic, very informative. I'm sure our attendees took a lot away. James already mentioned the next webinar in this series will take place on August 13th, same time slot from 2 p.m. to 2:45. Be sure to join, and on the call with us will be Angela. She's a manager of customer care, and Monica Depta, our director of customer experience. And we will continue with Powering the Modern Workplace with Sparkrock 365 journey. Thank you very much, and this now concludes our webinar. We thank you all for joining us today and hope that you have a great day ahead. Stay safe and take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, everybody.